is something happening inside your body right now that you cannot feel, cannot see, and cannot force. A quiet machinery of repair, renewal, and protection that only switches on when you finally allow yourself to rest. Tonight, you will discover what that machinery is doing and understand, perhaps for the very first time, exactly what your body is asking for when it asks for sleep. Welcome to Sleepy Mind Science. Wherever you are right now, perhaps lying still, your thoughts still carrying the weight of the day, perhaps already feeling that familiar pull toward rest. Allow yourself to simply be here. We will trace 100 sleep science facts about what happens inside you when sleep is taken away. From the quiet clearing systems deep inside your brain, to the slow dissolving of your body's defenses, to the tiny hourly shifts that move you, night by night, towards something either whole or worn. These gentle journeys through the science of rest create a quiet community of people learning to take sleep seriously again. A soft like, subscribe, or a thought shared in the comments helps other restless minds find their way here and brings us closer to protecting this peaceful space, one sleepy soul at a time. Your presence here tonight means everything. Settle into wherever you are resting now. Let your shoulders drop and your jaw unclench. You don't need to hold on to any of this. Simply let the words wash over you like something warm and unhurried. Feel that slow heaviness spreading through you, like your body already knows what it needs and is gently, quietly beginning to take it. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You are resting where your body's oldest repair systems are quietly waking. Let your mind soften into the hum of everything healing. And now, we begin. Every night you sleep, your body enters a state that science is only beginning to fully understand. Sleep is not simply the absence of wakefulness. It is an active, highly organized biological process involving hundreds of distinct physiological changes happening simultaneously throughout your body. Your heart slows, your muscles relax, your blood pressure dips, hormones begin their nightly cycles, repair processes activate, and deep inside your brain, a network of channels opens to flush away the chemical waste that accumulated while you were awake. Sleep is not a pause in life. It is, in many ways, life's most essential function. When we don't get enough of it, nearly every system in the body begins to shift. Quietly at first, then more visibly, and then in ways that accumulate over time into something profound. The recommended amount of sleep for adults is between 7 and 9 hours each night, a figure established through decades of research and consistently supported by major health organizations, including the National Institutes of Health and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. Yet research suggests that roughly 1 in 3 adults in the United States regularly sleeps fewer than 7 hours. That is not a small number. It means that a significant portion of the population, hundreds of millions of people, are moving through their days carrying a hidden biological debt, a debt that the body keeps very careful track of, even when the mind has learned to ignore the early signals of fatigue. Sleep is divided into distinct stages, each with its own biological purpose. There are 3 stages of non-rapid eye movement sleep, often called NREM, and one stage of rapid eye movement sleep, known as REM. These stages cycle through the night in roughly 90-minute intervals. Most deep, slow-wave sleep, the kind associated with physical restoration, occurs in the early part of the night. REM sleep, which is associated with memory consolidation and emotional processing, increases in proportion toward morning. When sleep is cut short, it is often this REM-rich portion of the night that disappears first, taking with it some of the most complex and essential work the sleeping brain performs. Within the first hour of sleep deprivation, your brain begins to change in ways that are measurable. Studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, have shown that even a single night of insufficient sleep alters the activity of the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for reasoning, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Connections between the prefrontal cortex and the brain's emotional center, the amygdala, weaken, making it harder to regulate reactions to stress, frustration, or worry. This is not a metaphor. It is a physical, measurable shift in the way your brain is connected, and it can begin after just one night of sleeping less than you need. Deep inside the brain, a structure called the hippocampus plays a central role in the formation of new memories. During sleep, information gathered throughout the day is moved from short-term storage into longer-term memory, a process called memory consolidation. When sleep is reduced, this transfer is incomplete. Research has shown that people who sleep less than 6 hours process and retain newly learned material significantly less effectively than those who sleep 7 or more. The brain is not saving your experiences while you sleep by accident. It is performing one of its most essential organizational tasks, and insufficient sleep interrupts that task before it is finished. There is a biological mechanism inside every cell of your body called the circadian clock. It is a molecular timekeeper, a set of genes and proteins that cycle through roughly a 24-hour rhythm, coordinating when cells repair themselves, when hormones are released, when tissues grow, and when the immune system is most active. Sleep is deeply intertwined with this internal clock. When sleep is shortened or shifted, when you stay up late and wake early, night after night, the circadian clock becomes misaligned with your actual behavior. And when the clock falls out of rhythm, so does nearly everything it regulates. One of the most studied consequences of short sleep is its effect on the stress hormone, cortisol. Under normal conditions, cortisol follows a predictable daily arc, rising sharply in the morning to help you wake and focus, then declining gradually through the day and reaching its lowest point during deep sleep. Sleep deprivation disrupts this arc. Research has consistently found that reducing sleep raises evening cortisol levels, keeping the body in a low-grade state of biological stress, even when nothing stressful is actually happening. Over time, chronically elevated cortisol affects blood pressure, immune function, blood sugar regulation, and the brain itself. Your immune system does some of its most important work while you sleep. During deep sleep, the body releases cytokines, small signaling proteins that help direct the immune response, fight infection, and regulate inflammation. When sleep is reduced, the production of these protective proteins is disrupted. Studies have found that people who sleep fewer than 6 hours are more susceptible to the common cold and take longer to recover from illness. One carefully designed study found that people sleeping fewer than 6 hours were more than 4 times more likely to develop a cold after exposure to the virus than those sleeping 7 or more hours. Sleep is not merely correlated with immune health. It is one of the primary mechanisms through which the immune system sustains itself. The relationship between sleep and inflammation is one of the most active areas of current sleep research. Inflammation is a protective response. It is how the body signals that something needs attention. But when it becomes chronic and low-grade, it is associated with a wide range of serious health conditions, including heart disease, diabetes, depression, and cognitive decline. Sleep deprivation activates inflammatory signaling pathways, elevating levels of interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, two well-studied markers of systemic inflammation. In a sense, the body responds as if something requires its attention, quietly, in the background, without alarm. Over time, that quiet response accumulates into consequences that are anything but quiet. So already, just 10 facts into our journey, something is becoming clear. Sleep deprivation does not simply make you feel tired. It changes your brain's connectivity, disrupts your hormonal cycles, weakens your immune defenses, and activates pathways of inflammation that, over time, affect the entire body. This is not what most people are taught about sleep. Most people learn that sleep is rest, a pause, something you catch up on when you can. But the science tells a different story. Sleep is a process, and when the process is shortened, the consequences move quietly through every system, like water finding the lowest point in a room. Your heart works differently at night than it does during the day. During deep sleep, heart rate slows and blood pressure drops by roughly 10 to 20%, a phenomenon researchers call nocturnal dipping. This drop is not simply a side effect of rest. It is a protective mechanism. The cardiovascular system uses this window of lower demand to repair blood vessel walls, reduce arterial stiffness, and recover from the elevated demands of waking life. When sleep is insufficient or fragmented, this dipping process is reduced or lost entirely, and research has consistently linked the absence of nocturnal blood pressure dipping with higher long-term risk of cardiovascular disease. Adults who regularly sleep fewer than 6 hours have been found to have significantly higher rates of hypertension, high blood pressure, than those sleeping 7 to 9 hours. This relationship holds even after accounting for other risk factors, like age, weight, and exercise habits. Sleep is not simply associated with blood pressure. The mechanisms are specific and well understood. Sleep deprivation increases activity in the sympathetic nervous system, the branch of the nervous system responsible for the fight or flight response, keeping blood vessels in a state of mild constriction, even during hours when they would normally be at rest. Over months and years, that persistent mild constriction slowly reshapes the cardiovascular system. Sleep affects the hormones that regulate hunger and fullness in ways that are both elegant and, for many people, unexpectedly familiar. Two hormones are central to this story. Leptin is produced by fat cells and tells the brain that the body has enough energy. Ghrelin is produced in the stomach and signals hunger. During sleep, leptin levels rise and ghrelin levels fall, a combination that reduces appetite and sustains a sense of fullness into the morning. When sleep is shortened, this balance shifts in the opposite direction. Leptin drops, ghrelin rises. The result is an increase in appetite, particularly for foods that are calorie-dense and easy to consume. That has nothing to do with actual energy need. The connection between short sleep and weight gain is not simply about having more hours awake to eat. The hormonal shift triggered by sleep deprivation specifically increases cravings for high sugar and high fat foods. Research suggests this happens in part because sleep-deprived brains show heightened activity in reward circuits in response to food imagery, similar to the way the brain responds to other rewarding stimuli when depleted. The body is not being weak-willed. It is following a biological signal that was designed in earlier evolutionary contexts to motivate energy-seeking when the body's reserves were threatened. Sleep loss tricks the ancient brain into believing that resources are scarce. Insulin is the hormone that allows cells throughout the body to absorb glucose from the blood and use it for energy. When insulin sensitivity decreases, a condition called insulin resistance, cells become less responsive to this signal. Blood sugar remains elevated, and the pancreas must work harder to compensate. Research has consistently found that even a few nights of partial sleep deprivation can reduce insulin sensitivity in otherwise healthy adults. Research published through 2025 found that individuals who regularly sleep fewer than 6 hours carry measurably elevated risk of developing type 2 diabetes, a condition affecting tens of millions of Americans and many millions more who carry elevated blood sugar without yet meeting the diagnostic threshold. Sleep is not peripheral to metabolic health, it is foundational to it. The skin is an organ, the body's largest organ, and it too depends on sleep for its daily maintenance and repair. During deep sleep, the pituitary gland releases a surge of growth hormone. This hormone is essential for cellular repair, tissue regeneration, and the production of collagen, the structural protein that keeps skin firm, smooth, and resilient. When sleep is consistently shortened, growth hormone secretion is reduced, and the skin's nightly repair cycle is interrupted. Over time, this appears as something people often attribute simply to aging. Fine lines, diminished elasticity, slower recovery from sun exposure, and a dullness that no amount of daytime effort seems to fully correct. Elevated cortisol, a consequence that accumulates across nights of insufficient sleep, directly affects the skin's structural proteins. High cortisol levels break down collagen and elastin, the two proteins that give skin its structure and resilience. Cortisol also weakens the skin barrier, the outermost layer of cells that prevents water loss and keeps environmental irritants out. Studies measuring transepidermal water loss have found that poor sleepers lose moisture significantly faster than good sleepers. This is one of the reasons a poor night's sleep is so immediately visible on the face. The skin is not just reflecting fatigue, it is showing you, at its surface, what is happening several layers deeper. There is a system inside the brain that was only definitively confirmed in human beings in 2024 after more than a decade of study in animal models. It is called the glymphatic system, and it is the brain's own waste removal network. During sleep, particularly during slow-wave deep sleep, tiny channels surrounding the brain's blood vessels open wider, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow through brain tissue and flush out the metabolic waste that accumulated during waking hours. Among the substances cleared by this system are amyloid beta and tau proteins, the same proteins that accumulate in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease when the glymphatic system is chronically impaired. This is not a theory. As of 2024, imaging in human surgical patients confirmed the physical existence of these pathways for the very first time. What makes the glymphatic system particularly relevant to the science of sleep deprivation is that it cannot fully operate while you are awake. During wakefulness, the spaces around blood vessels in the brain are narrowed, allowing less fluid to circulate. During deep sleep, these spaces expand, and the flow of cerebrospinal fluid increases substantially. In animal studies, this nighttime cleaning process has been shown to clear metabolic waste at roughly twice the rate measured during waking, a finding that was foundational to the discovery of the glymphatic system and that subsequent human research has continued to support. When sleep is reduced, especially when slow-wave deep sleep is shortened, the glymphatic system's work is left unfinished, and the compounds it would have cleared remain in the brain tissue a little longer, night after night, accumulating over time. A 2025 human study using a wearable monitoring device found something that researchers had not expected. The glymphatic system does not simply switch on at sleep onset and off at waking. Instead, its activity appears to accelerate the longer a person sleeps, building momentum as the night progresses, and then slow down gradually as the person wakes. This means that sleep duration is not just a matter of feeling rested the next morning. It is directly tied to how thoroughly the brain is cleaned each night. Cutting sleep short does not interrupt a process that has already finished. It interrupts a process that was still accelerating. A separate 2025 study published in Nature Communications found direct evidence that the glymphatic system clears amyloid beta and tau proteins in humans overnight, and that sleep deprivation measurably reduces this clearance. When participants were kept awake, morning levels of these proteins in the bloodstream were lower, not because they had cleared more, but because clearance had failed, and the proteins remained trapped in brain tissue rather than being carried out into circulation. This study represented the first direct human confirmation of a link that researchers had long suspected: that the way you sleep tonight is directly influencing your brain's long-term health in a measurable, molecular way. The emotional consequences of sleep deprivation are among the most immediately felt and among the most consistently studied. Sleep-deprived individuals show heightened reactivity in the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm center, in response to mildly negative images or experiences. At the same time, the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, the region that normally applies rational context to emotional responses, is weakened. The result is a nervous system that overreacts to small stressors and struggles to recover from them. Anxiety, irritability, and a sense of emotional fragility are not character traits in people who sleep poorly. They are neurological consequences of insufficient rest. Sleep deprivation affects the ability to read social cues with notable accuracy. Studies have found that sleep-deprived individuals are less accurate at identifying facial expressions, particularly neutral and mildly negative ones, which they are more likely to misread as threatening or hostile. This subtly distorts social experience. The world feels a little more adversarial. Small interactions carry more weight. This is another reason that chronic short sleep is associated with increased rates of interpersonal conflict, difficulty at work, and a persistent sense that things are harder than they need to be, when in fact, the nervous system has simply been deprived of the nightly recalibration it requires to perceive clearly. Reaction time is one of the most measurable casualties of insufficient sleep. Studies using standardized cognitive testing have shown that 17 to 19 hours of continuous wakefulness can produce reaction time deficits that researchers have compared to the performance effects of alcohol intoxication, equivalent to blood alcohol levels considered legally impaired in many countries. Yet people experiencing these impairments often report feeling alert and functional. Sleep deprivation, unlike alcohol, does not produce the clear sensation of impairment that would normally prompt caution. The brain adapts to its own reduced state. It calibrates to its new baseline, and it stops accurately reporting how much that baseline has actually changed. A pattern is becoming visible across these first 25 facts. Sleep deprivation does not arrive with a single dramatic symptom. It arrives quietly as a slightly shorter temper, a slightly slower recovery, a slightly weaker immune response, a slightly higher blood pressure, a slightly heavier appetite at the end of the day. These are not random inconveniences. They are the same biological machinery, all moving in the same direction, toward less repair, less protection, less capacity. Because the time that was allocated for maintenance was shortened. The body keeps the record, and tonight, you are already returning something to it. Let's pause here for a moment. As you breathe out slowly, appreciate what is happening inside you right now. Your heart rate is slowing. Your muscles are releasing tension they have been holding since morning. Your blood pressure is beginning its nightly descent. Your body has been waiting for this. Trillions of cells are beginning the work they can only do in the quiet dark. Cleaning, repairing, restoring. You are already, right now, giving your body what it has been asking for. Now we continue. The brain does not store memories in the same location where they are formed. When you experience something during the day, it is held temporarily in the hippocampus, a curved, seahorse-shaped structure deep in the brain. During sleep, these temporary memories are moved and woven into the broader fabric of long-term memory across the cortex. This transfer is not automatic. It depends on the oscillating patterns of electrical activity that characterize slow-wave sleep, particularly a rhythm called sleep spindles, which appear to act as the mechanism of transfer. When sleep is insufficient, this process is interrupted, and the memories that were not yet moved stay vulnerable, fading rather than consolidating. Sleep spindles, brief bursts of electrical activity measurable by EEG, are now thought to be one of the primary mechanisms through which the sleeping brain decides what information to keep and how to organize it. Research suggests that spindle activity during the night is predictive of how well someone will perform on learning tasks the next day, sometimes more predictive than the total amount of time spent sleeping. This finding has shifted understanding of sleep from a passive state of rest to an active, intelligence-organizing process. The sleeping brain is not waiting. It is working, quietly selecting, filing, and reinforcing the architecture of what you know. There is a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, that plays a central role in the health, growth, and maintenance of brain cells. It supports the formation of new neural connections, protects neurons from damage, and is associated with mood, cognitive function, and resilience to stress. Sleep is one of the primary regulators of BDNF levels in the brain. Sleep deprivation has been consistently associated with reduced BDNF expression. This is one of the mechanisms linking short sleep to increased risk of depression and anxiety, not simply through fatigue, but through a measurable reduction in the brain's own capacity to support itself. The relationship between sleep and mental health is bi-directional in a way that can feel difficult to navigate. Poor sleep worsens mood, anxiety, and emotional regulation. And depression, anxiety, and chronic stress consistently worsen sleep. Each one feeds the other. Research published across 2024 and 2025 has continued to refine the understanding of this loop, finding not just correlation, but specific neural mechanisms. Reduced prefrontal regulation, heightened amygdala reactivity, disrupted BDNF expression, and elevated cortisol, creating conditions that make it harder for the brain to achieve the restorative sleep it needs most. Understanding this loop is actually clarifying, because interrupting it in any one place can change the entire cycle. The lungs breathe more slowly during sleep. The body's demand for oxygen decreases as metabolic activity slows. This is normal and healthy, part of the parasympathetic nervous system's nighttime dominance. What is less widely known is that this slowing is also a period of vulnerability for people who have sleep apnea, a condition in which the airway partially collapses during sleep, causing repeated, brief interruptions in breathing. These interruptions fragment the sleep architecture, prevent the brain from reaching deep sleep stages, and trigger repeated microactivations of the stress response. An estimated 50 to 60 million Americans have sleep apnea, but research suggests only a small fraction have been diagnosed. For many people, the effects they attribute to poor sleep may, in part, be untreated breathing disruptions occurring dozens of times each night. The immune system's relationship with sleep goes deeper than the production of cytokines. During sleep, the body also performs a kind of inventory and maintenance of its adaptive immune memory. T cells, a type of white blood cell that recognizes and responds to specific pathogens, form stronger bonds with the cells they are meant to target during sleep. This is one reason why sleep is so important after vaccination. The immune response to a vaccine, the formation of protective antibodies and immune memory, is significantly more robust in people who sleep well in the nights following the injection. Sleep is not just maintaining existing immunity, it is constructing new immunity. A 2025 study found that sleep deprivation measurably shifts monocyte subclasses, a category of immune cell responsible for detecting and responding to infection and inflammation. Sleep-deprived individuals showed alterations in the distribution and function of these cells, consistent with a heightened inflammatory state. This is one reason that chronic short sleep is associated not just with getting sick more often, but with the kind of low-grade systemic inflammation linked to autoimmune conditions, metabolic disease, and cardiovascular risk. The immune system does not simply weaken during sleep deprivation. In some respects, it becomes dysregulated, responding where it may not need to, and less efficiently where it does. Muscle repair and physical recovery depend heavily on sleep. During deep sleep, growth hormone is released in pulses, and this hormone is the primary signal that directs the body to repair microdamage in muscle tissue, synthesize new proteins, and replenish energy stores in cells. Athletes who restrict sleep show measurably impaired recovery, higher rates of injury, and reduced performance on tests of strength and endurance. What is less often recognized is that this process is not exclusive to athletes. Everyone uses their muscles every day. Everyone accumulates microstress in tissue that is meant to be addressed at night. For anyone whose daily life involves sustained physical effort, which is most people, sleep is not optional recovery. It is the recovery. The liver performs much of its most intensive metabolic work during the night, clearing toxins, processing fats, regulating blood sugar, and coordinating the hormonal signals that govern metabolism. The liver's activity is tightly tied to the body's circadian clock. When sleep is shortened or shifted, the timing of liver function is disrupted. Blood sugar regulation becomes less precise, fat metabolism is altered. This is part of the reason that night shift workers, who sleep at times that are out of alignment with their circadian biology, have higher rates of metabolic syndrome, fatty liver disease, and cardiovascular disease than day workers with comparable overall sleep duration. The timing of sleep matters, not just the amount. Body temperature follows a precise circadian rhythm, falling in the late evening in a way that is closely linked to the onset of sleep. As the body cools, the brain receives one of its primary sleep onset signals. The drop in core temperature during the night is part of what allows deep sleep stages to be reached and maintained. When sleep is disrupted or compressed, this thermal cycle is disturbed. One consequence is that the body spends less time in the lowest temperature window associated with the deepest, most restorative sleep. Even a small shift in the timing or depth of this nightly cooling can measurably affect sleep quality and the restoration that depends on it. The gut and the brain are in constant communication through what researchers call the gut-brain axis, a network of nerve fibers, hormonal signals, and microbial metabolites linking the two organs. The gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in the digestive system, is now understood to influence mood, cognition, immune function, and even sleep quality through this axis. And the relationship goes both ways. Sleep deprivation alters the composition of the gut microbiome, reducing the diversity and abundance of beneficial bacterial species. This is a relatively new area of research, but the findings consistently suggest that poor sleep does not only affect the brain and the immune system directly, it may also be reshaping the microbial community that helps regulate both. Telomeres are the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes, structures that preserve the integrity of genetic material during cell division. Each time a cell divides, telomeres shorten slightly. When they become too short, the cell can no longer divide and either dies or enters a dysfunctional state. Telomere length is considered one of the most reliable markers of biological aging. Research has found that chronic sleep deprivation is associated with accelerated telomere shortening, suggesting that poor sleep does not simply make you feel older. At a cellular level, it may be contributing to faster biological aging. Sleep is not just protecting you from feeling unwell, it may be protecting the most fundamental biological structures that determine how long your cells can continue to function. The eyes show the effects of sleep deprivation long before most other parts of the body. The dark circles and puffiness associated with poor sleep have specific physiological causes. Blood vessels beneath the thin skin around the eyes dilate during sleep deprivation, making them more visible through the skin. Fluid that would normally be drained during restful horizontal sleep accumulates in the periorbital tissue. And the skin itself, its barrier already weakened by elevated cortisol and reduced growth hormone, holds less moisture, making it appear more fragile and translucent. These are not cosmetic inconveniences. They are the face's honest report of what happened the night before. Pain sensitivity increases with sleep deprivation. Research has found that even moderate sleep restriction raises the threshold for pain tolerance, meaning that things that would not normally hurt become uncomfortable, and things that are mildly uncomfortable become more difficult to manage. The mechanisms involve multiple pathways: elevated cortisol, changes in the brain's endogenous opioid system, and reduced activity in pain-modulating regions of the cortex. This has important implications for people living with chronic pain conditions, for whom poor sleep and increased pain exist in a mutually worsening cycle. Addressing sleep in these contexts is not simply supportive care. For many people, it is one of the most direct interventions available. We are now 40 facts in, And what emerges is a picture of the sleeping body as something far more active and architecturally important than its modest appearance suggests. The resting figure in the dark is engaged in cellular repair, hormonal regulation, neural reorganization, immune calibration, metabolic maintenance, waste clearance, and structural preservation at the molecular level, all simultaneously, all in coordinated sequence, all dependent on the amount of time given. We have been exploring what happens when that time is taken away. We will now go deeper into why the body holds these processes so closely and what it means for the years ahead when sleep is chronically short. Take a slow breath. Notice how your body already feels a little heavier now, a little quieter. We are moving through this science together, you and I, and everyone else listening in their own quiet dark tonight. There's no hurry. The facts will come as slowly as you need them to. Let's continue. The blood pressure of a person who sleeps fewer than 6 hours is measurably different from someone sleeping 7 to 9, even when all other lifestyle factors are equal. Sleep-deprived adults show increased activity in the renin-angiotensin system, a hormonal pathway that regulates blood vessel constriction and sodium retention. This system is one of the primary targets of antihypertensive medications. Sleep deprivation activates it naturally, in the absence of any identifiable stressor, as if the body reads insufficient rest as a form of threat and responds by raising its own internal pressure. Over months and years, this persistent mild elevation reshapes the arteries and quietly raises the risk of heart attack and stroke. Sleep affects the brain's default mode network, a system of interconnected regions that becomes active when the mind is at rest, reflecting, imagining, or processing emotional experience. The default mode network is thought to play a central role in self-understanding, creativity, and the integration of experience into identity. Sleep deprivation disrupts its normal activity patterns, leading to fragmented or poorly integrated mental processing. One reason that people often describe feeling not quite themselves after a string of poor nights. This subjective sense of disconnection has a neurological basis. The network that normally integrates experience and sustains a coherent sense of self is running on diminished resources. The kidneys slow their filtration rate during the night as part of the body's circadian program, allowing a longer interval of rest between urination than would otherwise be expected given continuous blood filtration. This rhythm is dependent on proper sleep timing. Disrupted sleep, particularly sleep that is fragmented or cut short, interferes with this renal rhythm and is associated with increased overnight urination, which in turn further fragments sleep. This is another example of the self-reinforcing quality of sleep disruption. The effects of poor sleep create conditions that make further sleep more difficult to achieve. Bone metabolism depends on sleep in ways that have only recently been fully appreciated. Osteoblasts, the cells responsible for building new bone tissue, and osteoclasts, the cells that break down old bone, are regulated in part by the same hormonal signals tied to sleep, including growth hormone and cortisol. Chronic sleep deprivation, with its suppressed growth hormone and elevated cortisol, shifts the balance of this system in a direction that favors bone breakdown over bone formation. Long-term studies have found associations between chronic short sleep and lower bone density, adding a structural dimension to the biological consequences of sleeping less. The brain's ability to generate creative solutions to problems, to find unexpected connections between unrelated pieces of information, is significantly enhanced by REM sleep. During REM, the brain processes recent experiences in the context of older, more distantly stored memories, creating associative networks that waking cognition does not typically construct. This is thought to be one reason that people often wake with solutions to problems that seemed intractable the night before. When REM sleep is shortened, as often happens when overall sleep duration is cut, this associative, generative process is reduced. Less sleep does not simply leave less time for rest, it leaves less time for the brain to make its most unusual and valuable connections. The body's ability to regulate its own temperature becomes less precise under sleep deprivation. This is particularly relevant in extreme environments, but even in ordinary conditions, the subtle dysregulation of thermoregulation under sleep loss contributes to physical discomfort, increased sweating, and the mild but measurable reduction in physical stamina. The body is less efficient at maintaining its thermal equilibrium, one of many quiet signs that the systems designed to keep it functioning smoothly are operating with fewer resources than they need. Appetite regulation is not simply hormonal, it is also behavioral. Sleep-deprived individuals show changes in the timing and pattern of eating later in the evening, consuming more in single sittings, and being less responsive to the internal signals that normally indicate fullness. These behavioral shifts compound the hormonal ones. The body is not only craving more food under sleep deprivation, it is also poorly equipped to know when it has had enough. This dual disruption, increased appetite signal, decreased satiety signal, creates conditions that are particularly challenging for anyone trying to maintain a balanced relationship with food. The immune memory formed during sleep is not only relevant to vaccines, it also shapes the body's ability to respond to threats it has encountered before. Sleep allows the immune system to rehearse and refine its responses, maintaining a sharper, more readily deployable library of immune defenses. When sleep is chronically insufficient, this library becomes less well organized and less current. The body does not forget its previous exposures, but its ability to respond quickly and precisely to them may be subtly but meaningfully reduced. Growth hormone secretion during sleep is particularly sensitive to the depth of slow-wave sleep, the deepest stage of NREM. Light sleep and fragmented sleep, even when the total duration is adequate, produce less growth hormone than consolidated, deep sleep. This distinction matters because many people who believe they are getting enough sleep are in fact experiencing sleep that is shallow or interrupted in ways that prevent the deepest stages from occurring. Total sleep time is one measure of sleep adequacy, but the quality and architecture of that sleep, whether it actually reaches the depths where the most restorative processes occur, is equally important. We are halfway through our journey, and the picture emerging from these 50 facts is one of extraordinary interdependence. Sleep is not a single process serving a single function. It is a coordinator, a nightly window during which dozens of otherwise independent biological systems perform their most intensive maintenance tasks. The brain clears its waste, the immune system consolidates its memory, the skin rebuilds its barrier, the heart recovers its rhythm, bones remodel, hormones recalibrate, memories organize, emotions integrate. Every one of these processes depends on the same thing: sufficient, uninterrupted time in the dark. And every one of them is diminished in its own specific, measurable way when that time is reduced. The body is not punishing you for sleeping less. It is simply showing you what was left unfinished. Rest here for a moment. Every cell in your body carries a clock, a biological rhythm older than language, older than memory, older than nearly everything we know about ourselves. That rhythm has been cycling through its pattern for your entire life. Right now, in this exact moment, it is calling everything toward rest. You are not fighting time tonight. You are moving with it. The ancient biological momentum that has always carried you towards sleep is carrying you there again, right now, in this quiet moment. And we continue. The blood-brain barrier, the protective membrane that separates the brain's environment from the rest of the circulatory system, becomes subtly more permeable under sleep deprivation. This barrier exists to keep harmful substances from entering the brain while allowing the molecules it needs to pass through. Research has found that sustained sleep loss can compromise its integrity, potentially allowing inflammatory molecules and other compounds into the brain environment that would normally be excluded. This is another pathway through which the systemic inflammation caused by sleep deprivation can reach the brain, adding to the direct neural effects of insufficient rest. The circadian rhythm does not only regulate sleep, it coordinates the timing of virtually every organ system in the body, including the digestive system, the cardiovascular system, the liver, the kidneys, and the immune system. Each of these systems has its own internal clock, synchronized with the central clock in the brain. When sleep is disrupted, these peripheral clocks can drift out of alignment with each other, a state called circadian desynchrony. When the heart's clock and the immune system's clock and the liver's clock are no longer perfectly synchronized, their coordinated functions begin to lose precision. This desynchrony is thought to underlie many of the broad-ranging health consequences of chronic sleep disruption. Melatonin is one of the most important signaling molecules in the sleep system. It is produced by the pineal gland in the center of the brain and released in response to darkness, rising in the evening, peaking in the middle of the night, and declining toward morning. Melatonin does not cause sleep directly. It signals to every cell in the body that it is nighttime, coordinating the cascade of physiological changes that prepare the body for sleep. Melatonin also functions as an antioxidant, protecting cells from oxidative damage during the night. When sleep is shortened or disrupted by light exposure, melatonin production is reduced, and with it, both the coordination of the sleep signal and this nighttime antioxidant protection. The brain's waste-clearing system, the glymphatic system, relies on a specific class of water channels embedded in the brain's support cells, called astrocytes. These channels are made of a protein called aquaporin-4, and they govern how efficiently cerebrospinal fluid moves through brain tissue during sleep. Researchers found that dysfunction in aquaporin-4 channels significantly impairs glymphatic clearance, and that chronic sleep deprivation may affect the regulation of these channels over time. This is one reason why long-term patterns of short sleep are thought to have cumulative effects on brain health that are distinct from those of a single night of poor rest. Sleep and memory are connected in a way that is not simply about how much you remember the next day. Sleep shapes which memories are preserved, how they are organized, and how emotionally weighted they feel. Research has found that sleep preferentially consolidates memories with emotional significance, particularly those associated with negative or threatening experiences. REM sleep appears to play a specific role in this process, reducing the emotional charge of difficult memories while preserving their factual content, a process sometimes described as emotional memory processing. When REM sleep is reduced, this processing is incomplete, and the emotional weight of difficult experiences may persist with less natural resolution. Sleep disturbance, particularly difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking before the rest the body needed was complete, is present in nearly all major depressive episodes and in the majority of anxiety disorders. For a long time, poor sleep was understood primarily as a symptom of these conditions. Current research has shifted that understanding. Treating sleep in people experiencing depression often produces measurable improvements in mood, energy, and cognitive function, independent of other therapeutic approaches. Sleep is not simply a sign of how someone is doing. In many cases, it is one of the most accessible places where change can begin. The hormone testosterone, important for muscle maintenance, bone density, energy, and mood in both men and women, follows a circadian pattern, with its highest levels occurring during the final hours of sleep and the first hour after waking. Sleep deprivation disrupts this pattern. Researchers found that sleeping fewer than 5 hours a night, even for just 1 week, has been shown to reduce testosterone levels by 10 to 15% in young men, an effect researchers have compared to the hormonal shift of aging 10 to 15 years. The body does not simply suppress testosterone as a side effect of being tired. It is unable to complete the nocturnal production cycle that generates it. The word insomnia in clinical sleep medicine refers not simply to difficulty sleeping, but to a pattern of difficulty sleeping that causes significant distress or impaired function, persisting for at least 3 nights per week over at least 3 months. It is one of the most common sleep disorders, affecting an estimated 30% of adults in the United States in some form. Insomnia is not simply a problem of the night. It is a 24-hour condition, characterized by hyperarousal that persists through waking hours, making even daytime rest or relaxation more difficult. The body is, in effect, running in a heightened state of alertness around the clock. The nervous system has 2 main branches operating in balance. The sympathetic, often called the fight or flight system, and the parasympathetic, often called the rest and digest system. During healthy sleep, the parasympathetic system dominates. Heart rate and blood pressure fall. Digestive activity increases. The body performs its maintenance. Chronic sleep deprivation disrupts this balance, keeping the sympathetic system in a mild but persistent state of activation, even during sleep. This is measurable through heart rate variability, a metric that reflects the flexibility and resilience of the autonomic nervous system. Lower heart rate variability is associated with higher cardiovascular risk, and chronic poor sleep consistently reduces it. The glymphatic system's activity during sleep was found in 2025 research to be driven in part by slow oscillations in a neurotransmitter called norepinephrine. As the brain transitions into deep sleep, norepinephrine levels fall in slow, rhythmic pulses. These pulses cause the brain's blood vessels to gently dilate and constrict in synchrony, creating a pumping motion that drives cerebrospinal fluid through the tissue. This is one of the most elegant mechanisms discovered in recent sleep science. The brain's own cleaning system is powered not by a separate pump, but by the natural rhythm of its own chemistry changing as it descends into sleep. The cleaning is not separate from the sleeping. It is the sleeping. The developing brain is particularly vulnerable to sleep loss. In children and adolescents, sleep is not simply maintenance, it is construction. Growth hormone is released in its largest quantities during deep sleep in the young, supporting not just tissue repair, but actual physical development. The brain too is still maturing, laying down myelin, the insulating sheath that speeds neural communication, and forming the long-range connections that will eventually support adult cognition. Adolescents who consistently sleep fewer than 8 hours show measurable differences in brain development, differences in connectivity, in emotional regulation, and in the speed and accuracy of cognitive processing compared to those who sleep adequately. Sleep plays a role in the regulation of appetite that extends beyond leptin and ghrelin. The endocannabinoid system, a network of molecular signals associated with appetite, pleasure, and pain regulation, is also modulated by sleep. Sleep deprivation has been found to elevate levels of a specific endocannabinoid called 2-AG, which activates cannabinoid receptors in a way that increases appetite and reduces sensitivity to satiety. This is a relatively recent finding that adds another layer to the understanding of why sleep loss and weight gain are so closely linked. The body's own internal chemistry shifts in ways that make eating feel more rewarding and stopping feel harder. The eyes, like most other organs, have their own circadian rhythm, and their visual performance fluctuates across the day in ways tied to sleep and circadian alignment. Sleep deprivation reduces visual acuity, slows the eye's ability to track moving objects, and increases sensitivity to glare. These changes are subtle in well-lit conditions, but become more pronounced at low light levels, which is one reason that driving after a sleepless night is particularly dangerous, even when the driver does not feel subjectively impaired. The visual system, like the reaction time system, has already degraded before the conscious mind registers the degree of the change. Something called microsleep, brief involuntary episodes of sleep lasting between 1 and 30 seconds, begins to occur in sleep-deprived individuals even when they believe they are awake and alert. These episodes are not controllable and often go unnoticed by the person experiencing them. During a microsleep, the brain enters a state indistinguishable from light sleep. Processing stops, awareness disappears, and the person ceases to register what is happening around them. The significance of this is most obvious in contexts involving sustained attention, driving, operating equipment, monitoring a critical process. But microsleep also fragments the quality of waking thought in ways that affect everything from complex reasoning to basic conversation. The research on sleep and Alzheimer's disease has become one of the most active areas in all of neuroscience, and what it consistently finds is a close bidirectional relationship. Sleep deprivation accelerates the accumulation of amyloid beta and tau proteins in the brain, the molecular hallmarks of Alzheimer's pathology. Alzheimer's pathology, in turn, disrupts the sleep systems that would otherwise clear these proteins, creating a feedback loop that can begin years or even decades before symptoms appear. This suggests that the sleep habits of midlife are not neutral in their relationship to cognitive aging. They are, according to current research, among the most modifiable risk factors for dementia, and that, in the right context, carries genuine reason for hope. Sleep is now understood to be important not just for brain health, but for the health of the meningeal lymphatic system, the network of vessels running along the outer membranes of the brain that helps drain cerebrospinal fluid and immune cells away from the central nervous system. These vessels have been found to decline in function with aging, and their impairment is associated with reduced clearance of waste proteins and increased neuroinflammation. Research is now exploring whether optimizing sleep can help maintain meningeal lymphatic function across the lifespan, adding yet another structural dimension to the relationship between sleep and the aging brain. The role of sleep in emotional learning is distinct from its role in factual memory. When people learn something associated with a fearful or threatening experience, sleep appears to help integrate and contextualize that fear, reducing its immediate triggering power while preserving the useful information the fear contains. This process is disrupted in people who are sleep deprived or who suffer from sleep disorders. It is thought to be one reason that post-traumatic stress and anxiety disorders frequently involve both sleep disruption and persistent emotional reactivity, and why treatments that improve sleep often produce parallel improvements in emotional symptoms. The liver regulates blood glucose overnight through a process called glycogenolysis, breaking down stored glycogen to maintain blood sugar at stable levels during the fasting period of sleep. This process is governed by the circadian clock and by hormonal signals that depend on the timing and quality of sleep. When sleep is disrupted, the precision of overnight blood sugar regulation declines. This is one of the mechanisms linking short or fragmented sleep to elevated morning blood glucose and, over time, to insulin resistance and diabetes risk, even in people with no other metabolic risk factors. The word adenosine refers to a chemical that accumulates in the brain during waking hours, building up as a byproduct of neural activity. The longer you are awake, the more adenosine accumulates, and the stronger the biological drive to sleep becomes. During sleep, adenosine is cleared. This is, in the simplest terms, how the body's sleep drive works. Caffeine does not reduce adenosine. It blocks the receptors that detect it, creating the subjective sensation of alertness, while the adenosine continues to accumulate. When the caffeine wears off, the waiting adenosine floods the system. This is the crash. And it means that using caffeine to compensate for short sleep does not restore the brain to its rested state. It delays the signal. The debt remains. The glymphatic system does not operate in the same way in all sleep positions. Research in animal models and preliminary evidence in humans suggests that sleeping on one side allows more efficient cerebrospinal fluid flow through brain tissue than sleeping on the back or stomach. The lateral sleeping position appears to optimize the alignment of the perivascular channels through which the fluid moves. While this finding should be held lightly, as research into sleep position and glymphatic function in humans is still developing, it represents one of the more intriguing questions in current sleep science. Whether the specific way the body is positioned during sleep might affect the efficiency of the brain's nightly cleaning. The body's primary antioxidant systems, the molecular defenses that protect cells from the damaging effects of oxidative stress, are partially regulated by sleep. During sleep, production of key antioxidant enzymes increases, and the activity of protective pathways rises. Sleep deprivation increases oxidative stress markers throughout the body, including in the brain, the heart, and the vascular system. This oxidative burden is thought to contribute to the accelerated cellular aging associated with chronic short sleep, a process that at the molecular level looks not unlike the natural aging process occurring at a faster rate. There is evidence that the body's DNA repair machinery is more active during sleep than during waking. DNA is damaged continuously by normal metabolic processes, UV exposure, and environmental toxins, and most of this damage is repaired quickly and efficiently. But some repair processes are preferentially concentrated in the sleeping hours, when the cellular environment is quieter and the body can devote more resources to maintenance. Chronic sleep deprivation accumulates unrepaired DNA damage, including in neurons, which do not replicate, and therefore cannot simply replace cells with accumulated damage. Over time, this may contribute to the neurodegenerative changes associated with aging and chronic poor sleep. The pineal gland, the small pine cone-shaped structure deep in the center of the brain that produces melatonin, is remarkably sensitive to light. Even brief exposure to light during the night, including the blue spectrum light emitted by screens, can suppress melatonin production for hours. This is not a minor effect. In people with insomnia and delayed sleep phase disorder, conditions in which the timing of the sleep system is shifted later, light exposure before bed is often a significant maintaining factor. The biology of the pineal gland evolved in a world where darkness came gently and completely each night. The nightly melatonin signal is simply more easily disrupted now than it once was. Something worth knowing, not as a source of worry, but as a source of understanding, is that the consequences of sleep deprivation are not always immediately visible. The body has significant compensatory capacity. It can mask the effects of poor sleep for surprisingly long periods before the cumulative deficit begins to show in ways that are obvious to the person living with it. This compensatory masking is one reason that many people living with chronic, insufficient sleep genuinely believe they are functioning well. The baseline has shifted quietly beneath them, and what they experience as their normal state of alertness and well-being is, in fact, a quieter version of what adequate sleep would restore. By now, the answer to the question at the heart of our journey is fully in view. What happens to your body when you sleep less? Nearly everything changes. The brain's waste systems slow, memory consolidation is interrupted, emotional regulation falters, immune defenses weaken, hormonal cycles are distorted, the heart's recovery window narrows, the skin's repair machinery loses its nightly rhythm, cells accumulate more damage, inflammation rises. The system of clocks that coordinates everything falls gradually out of alignment with itself. None of these changes arrive alone. They arrive together, quietly, gradually, in the ordinary accumulation of shortened nights. And they are, without exception, reversible. The body's appetite for sleep is patient. It has been waiting, and it is still waiting for the chance to do what it was designed to do. You might be feeling softer now, slower. That is not weakness. That is the body remembering what it knows. Your heart has beaten more than 2 billion times without a single conscious thought from you. Your lungs have breathed without instruction. Your cells have divided and repaired in the quiet without your supervision. The body knows how to do this. It has always known. Tonight, all you are being asked to do is stay out of its way. Let everything unfold in the order it has always unfolded. We are almost in the final stretch now. The body begins preparing for sleep several hours before you lie down. Core temperature begins to fall. Melatonin begins to rise. The digestive system slows. The muscles soften slightly in their resting tone. This preparation is not passive. It is a coordinated sequence. Sleep does not begin at the moment you close your eyes. It begins long before, in the quiet biology of the evening hours. Slow wave sleep, the deepest stage of NREM, is most abundant in the first third of the night. This is when the largest pulses of growth hormone are released. When sleep begins late or is cut short at the front end, it is this deep, early sleep that is most reduced. The brain can recover some of what it loses, but the deepest, most physically restorative portion of the night is anchored to specific hours, and those hours are not infinitely flexible. The sleeping brain is not silent. It is alive with rhythmic electrical activity, delta waves rolling slowly through the cortex during deep sleep, sleep spindles flickering briefly in the transition stages, theta waves humming quietly in the lighter phases. These rhythms are not random. They are the signatures of the brain doing its work, organizing, consolidating, cleaning, repairing. Adequate sleep improves athletic performance in ways that go beyond physical recovery. Reaction time, split-second decision-making, coordination, and tactical awareness all improve with proper sleep and decline with deprivation. Research with professional athletes has found that extending sleep to 9 hours produces measurable improvements in sprint time, reaction speed, and mood. These are not marginal effects. They are significant enough that sleep is now considered one of the most underutilized performance tools in competitive sport. The word homeostasis refers to the body's tendency to maintain stability, to return to balance when disturbed. Sleep is one of the body's most powerful homeostatic mechanisms. It does not just maintain existing function. It actively returns disturbed systems toward equilibrium, recalibrating the hormonal, neural, immune, and metabolic systems that drifted during the demands of waking life. When sleep is allowed its full time, the body wakes closer to center. When it is not, the drift accumulates. Chronic partial sleep restriction, sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night for weeks, has been shown to produce cumulative cognitive impairment equivalent to, and in some studies exceeding, that of a single all-night sleep deprivation. Yet, people in the partial restriction group consistently rate their own sleepiness as much less severe than it actually is. The brain adapts to its diminished state in a way that obscures its own impairment. This is perhaps the most important thing to understand about habitual short sleep. It does not feel as bad as it is. Sleep and creativity are connected in ways that feel almost poetic when you encounter them in research. The associative leaps that characterize creative insight, the unexpected linking of distant concepts, the recognition of a pattern hidden in apparent randomness, appear to be generated most readily after adequate REM sleep. The dreaming brain, it seems, is not merely replaying the day. It is testing unusual combinations, exploring edges, and sometimes returning to waking life with the solution it found in the dark. The heart does something specific during deep sleep that it cannot do while awake. It enters a state of prolonged parasympathetic dominance, a deeply restored low-demand state, and uses this window to reduce inflammation in its own tissue, repair small areas of endothelial stress, and reset the sensitivity of its own pressure regulation. For anyone living with cardiovascular risk, this nightly window is not a luxury. It is a physiological necessity, a narrow opportunity that opens each night and closes at dawn. The body's immune response to infection is timed in part by the circadian clock. Fever is more likely to be generated at night. Inflammatory responses peak during sleep. Natural killer cell activity, the front line of the immune response to infected or abnormal cells, is highest during the sleeping hours. These patterns are not arbitrary. They reflect the evolutionary reality that the immune system does its most intensive surveillance and response work during the period when the body's other systems have reduced their demand on shared resources. Something subtle happens to the voice after insufficient sleep. The muscles of the larynx, like all muscles, lose some of their tone and precision under conditions of physical stress and sleep loss. The vocal cords vibrate less cleanly, and speech patterns shift in ways that can be detected even by listeners who don't know the speaker well. Research has found that sleep-deprived speakers are perceived as less persuasive, less emotionally present, and less trustworthy. not because of what they say, but because of the subtle acoustic qualities of how they say it. The body communicates its state of depletion in frequencies that the listening brain is exquisitely tuned to hear. The kidneys, like the liver, operate on a circadian schedule that is sensitive to sleep timing. Hormones that regulate water and sodium balance are released in patterns tied to the sleep cycle. When sleep is fragmented or shifted in timing, renal function loses some of its daily precision. This is one reason that the water and salt balance of the body is subtly less well regulated in chronic short sleepers, and one reason that the blood pressure effects of poor sleep are in part a kidney story as well as a cardiac one. The body temperature reaches its lowest point during the deepest part of sleep, usually somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning. This nadir is a reliable biological marker of circadian phase. It is also, perhaps, one of the most intimate moments of the night, when the body has moved as far as it can from its waking state, when the systems of maintenance and repair are at their most active, and when the distance between the person you were during the day and the person you will be tomorrow is at its greatest. In that quiet nadir, something is being made. You spend, on average, about a third of your life asleep. This is not time subtracted from living. It is the condition that makes the rest of living possible. The body does not tolerate being cheated of this time without cost, but it also does not carry a grudge. Every night is a new offer. The mechanisms are waiting, the channels open, the hormones rise, the waste begins to clear. Whatever happened last night or the night before, the body is ready tonight to begin again. Sleep is protective against the kind of cognitive decline that accumulates invisibly across middle age. Studies tracking cognitive function in adults over years find that those who sleep between 7 and 8 hours show the most stable trajectories, while those who consistently sleep fewer than 6 hours show steeper rates of decline over time. The relationship is not simply about brain waste clearance. It is about all of the processes that sleep coordinates: the hormonal calibration, the inflammatory balance, the neural maintenance, each contributing its small portion to the preservation of a mind that remains clear, responsive, and present. The immune system, the brain, the heart, the skin, the bones, the gut, the hormonal system, all of them are, tonight, beginning the work that sleep makes possible. They do not require your attention or your effort. They require only time in the dark, time when the inputs have been quieted and the maintenance can begin. That is all sleep asks of you, not perfection, not discipline, just time, just this. During REM sleep, the motor system is temporarily quieted, a protective mechanism that prevents the body from physically acting out the movements of dreams. This quieting is controlled by specific neural circuits in the brainstem. When these circuits are disrupted, a condition called REM, sleep behavior disorder, people begin to physically enact their dreams. Research has found that this condition is often a very early indicator of certain neurodegenerative processes. The motor system's behavior during sleep, it turns out, can carry information about the brain's long-term trajectory that shows up years before other signs appear. The word restoration, when applied to sleep, is literal. The body restores what was used. It replenishes energy stores drawn down through the day. It repairs structural wear in muscle, in skin, in the lining of blood vessels. It removes the chemical residue that waking activity left behind. Restoration is not a metaphor for feeling better. It is a description of physical processes with measurable outcomes. Outcomes that depend entirely on whether the restoration was allowed to complete. Caffeine, alcohol, and artificial light are the three most common environmental factors that interfere with natural sleep in the modern world. Caffeine extends the time before sleep onset. Alcohol fragments the second half of the night and suppresses REM sleep. Artificial light delays melatonin and shifts the circadian clock later. Each arrived recently in evolutionary terms. The biology of sleep evolved without them. This mismatch between ancient biology and modern environment quietly underlies much of the sleep difficulty that so many people experience. The sound of your environment during sleep matters in ways that neuroscience is only beginning to map. Even during deep sleep, the auditory cortex remains partly active, monitoring sounds for potential threats and occasionally producing brief arousals in response. Traffic noise, a partner's breathing, a phone notification. Each of these can briefly interrupt the architecture of sleep without fully waking the person. The cumulative effect of these micro-arousals can measurably reduce the amount of slow-wave and REM sleep achieved over a night, even when total sleep time appears normal. A quiet environment is not merely a comfort. It is a condition for the completion of the night's work. The body does not distinguish between weekday and weekend sleep in the way that a schedule might suggest it should. The idea of sleeping in on the weekend to compensate for a lost weekday sleep, often called social jet lag, provides only partial and temporary recovery. Cognitive function and mood improve somewhat after recovery sleep, but some of the biological consequences of the preceding week's short sleep, particularly the metabolic and inflammatory effects, are not fully reversed by a weekend of longer nights. The body recovers imperfectly from accumulated sleep debt. The best version of sleep health is one that does not require catching up. Sleep in older adults changes in ways that are normal, but often misunderstood. The proportion of deep, slow-wave sleep decreases with age. The circadian clock shifts somewhat earlier, making late nights harder and early mornings more inevitable. Total sleep time may decrease slightly, and the night becomes more fragmented. These changes are not pathological. They are part of the natural aging of the sleep system. But they do mean that older adults need to be more gentle and intentional about protecting their sleep, because the reserves that allowed earlier decades to absorb occasional poor nights have become a little smaller. The system is not broken. It is simply more easily disturbed. Something genuinely hopeful emerges from all of this research. Sleep is one of the few aspects of health that is almost universally available, free, and responsive to change. The body's appetite for restorative sleep does not diminish. The mechanisms are intact. The glymphatic system is ready to run. The growth hormone is ready to be released. The immune system is ready to consolidate its memory. Everything that sleep is designed to do is still possible, every night, as long as the conditions are provided. The body has not given up. It is patient, it is persistent, and it will take whatever is offered. The word enough, when applied to sleep, is not a ceiling, it is a threshold. 7 to 9 hours is not an ideal to aspire to reluctantly. It is the minimum condition under which the body can fully complete its nightly program. Some people need 8, some need 9. Some thrive on 7. The individual variation is real, but the lower boundary is not arbitrary. It is determined by biology, but the time required to cycle through all stages of sleep, enough times to complete the repair, consolidation, and clearance that the night is allocated for. Below that threshold, something is always left unfinished. In the last few years, perhaps most concretely in 2024 and 2025, the science of sleep has moved from correlation to mechanism. We now know not just that poor sleep is associated with cognitive decline, but why. The glymphatic system's nightly work is incomplete. We now know not just that poor sleep raises cardiovascular risk, but how. Sympathetic activation, inflammatory cytokines, disrupted nocturnal dipping, altered renin-angiotensin signaling. We know not just that poor sleep worsens mood, but through which specific neural circuits the disruption occurs. This shift from association to mechanism changes how we understand sleep, from a lifestyle choice to a biological process with specific, identifiable consequences when it is shortened. And here, at the end of our journey, is the truth that all 100 facts have been building toward. Your body is not indifferent to what you do with your nights. It is exquisitely attentive. It keeps a meticulous, molecular record. It does not judge. It does not punish. It simply adjusts, restoring as much as the time allows, and leaving the rest for another night. The question at the center of all of this science is not complicated. It is this: what will you give it tonight? You are already answering that question by being here, by lying still, by allowing the quiet work of sleep to begin. The body already knows what to do. It has always known. Tonight, you are giving it the time it has been waiting for. And so, our quiet journey through the sleeping body comes gently to a close. We began in the brain, in those perivascular channels that open in the dark to carry away the residue of a long day's thinking. We moved through the heart's nightly dip, the immune system's quiet rehearsals, the skin's collagen repair, the liver's careful accounting of blood sugar, the ancient rhythm of the circadian clock, keeping time in every cell. We traveled from the molecular to the personal, from the clearance of amyloid proteins in the sleeping brain to the simple, patient fact that the body never stops asking for what it needs. And we found in every system the same answer. Rest is not passive. It is the most active thing the body does. Sleep reminds us that not everything important happens in motion. Most of the processes that preserve us, that maintain us, repair us, and prepare us for another day happen in the absence of effort, in the quiet that we make room for. The body does not need to be persuaded to heal. It only needs the time. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about this. Every system inside you, the brain clearing its waste, the heart recovering its rhythm, the immune cells forming their memories, the skin rebuilding its barrier, all of them are moving in the same direction tonight. All of them are resting into the same quiet. You are not a collection of separate systems. You are one body moving together toward the same stillness. Let your entire being dissolve into that unity, into the soft, organizing darkness, where everything is simply tending to itself. Prepare for deep sleep, no effort left, no boundaries remaining, only peace. If this gentle journey through the science of sleep helped you understand your body a little better tonight, or helped you release the quiet weight of a long day, a soft like or subscribe could help another restless mind find their way here. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there is nothing to do now. Nothing at all. The glymphatic system is already beginning its work. The channels are opening. The fluid is beginning to move. You don't need to hold any of this. It was never yours to carry. You have travelled far tonight, not across miles, but across the hidden interior of a body doing its best to take care of you. You can allow these thoughts of sleep science to feed now, like the last signals of waking dissolving at the threshold of rest. Not gone, simply no longer needed, leaving only the warm, unheld calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if the slow, patient weight of everything that has always been working for you, without your asking, is settling around you now, and is simply holding you. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way the tide carries what it finds, without force, without decision, arriving into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the glymphatic channels will still be there. The clocks inside your cells will still be turning. The body will still be offering, as it always has, another chance to rest deeply and wake restored. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, Sleepy Soul, and remember, your body has been waiting for this, and it already knows the way. Good night.